Hi there, I'm Ardis, and my story begins with something I never thought I'd have to say out loud. My own mother sold my car to fund my sister's dream trip to London, but the car was just the start. What they took from me ran much deeper. How could a family, the people meant to lift you up, be the very ones who tear you down? Before we dive into it, what's the most shocking thing you've ever had to forgive someone for? Where are you watching from tonight? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can heal and grow together. The cupcake sat on the chipped coffee table, its lone pink candle flickering uncertainly in the stillness of my apartment. I perched at the edge of the worn couch, staring at it, feeling absurd. 33 years old, and here I was, celebrating another birthday alone, in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of old books and lavender cleaning spray. Outside, the late March wind rattled the bare trees lining the street, a reminder that winter hadn't fully loosened its grip. I struck the match, watched the tiny flame bloom, and lit the candle. It sputtered once, like it was second-guessing itself, before standing steady. I wanted to make a wish, the way I did when I was a little girl, before I understood how the world worked. But this year, I had no wish. Or maybe I did, but it was too small, too bruised to form into words. I closed my eyes anyway and blew out the flame. The room smelled of burnt wax and disappointment. Somewhere deep inside, I had known this would happen. It wasn't the first time. Every year, I told myself it would be different, that they would remember, that they would call, even if just for a minute. Every year, I clung to a hope that looked more and more pathetic as time wore on. When I was a kid, birthdays meant balloons and backyard parties. For Sable. I had my share too, but hers were always bigger, brighter, louder. More people came, more presents piled up. I told myself it didn't matter. I was the quiet one, the bookworm. She was the spark everyone wanted to gather around. I reached for my phone out of habit, the screen lighting up with a new message. A tiny flutter of hope sparked in my chest. It was a forwarded photo from my cousin, Sable's birthday party. Gold and silver balloons floated above a crowd of people in glittery dresses and tailored suits. Tables heaved under towers of cupcakes and catered dishes. Champagne flowed freely into clinking glasses. In the center of it all stood Sable, radiant in a satin dress, grinning like she owned the world. Underneath the photo, a caption from my mother, "Our shining star deserves the best." I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. It wasn't just the party. It wasn't even the caption. It was the simple, blinding clarity of it all. They remembered birthdays, just not mine. The loneliness inside me hardened into something colder. I placed the phone face down on the table, the cupcake now a drooping mess of frosting. The tiny celebration I had stitched together with fragile hope was unraveling fast, thread by thread. For a long time, I just sat there, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Maybe some people were born invisible. Maybe I was one of them. Another buzz shook the table, a group text. My fingers trembled as I picked up the phone again. More photos of Sable's party flooded the screen. Sable posing with relatives I hadn't seen in years. Norma and Clive beaming with pride. Streamers, gifts, a cake so large it needed both her hands to cut it. Not a single message for me, not one. I turned the phone off without replying, set it gently down beside the cold cupcake. Through the thin window, the sky had turned a watery gray, the kind of color that makes you pull your sweater tighter and wonder if spring would ever really come. I pressed my forehead to the glass, breathing in the faint chill. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I waited for them to remember me. The smell of grilled meat floated in the air as I stepped into the backyard, a plate of store-bought cookies tucked under my arm. The familiar lawn chairs were out, the cheap plastic kind that buckled if you sat wrong. Norma and Clive's yard looked the same as it always did for Memorial Day. American flags stuck into potted plants, coolers filled with soda and beer, a Bluetooth speaker blaring country music too loud for the neighbors' comfort. I gave a small wave, half-hearted, to a few relatives scattered around the lawn. Some smiled back, polite, strained. Most didn't even notice me. Their attention was already swallowed by the cluster of people around Sable. She stood under the patio lights, laughing loudly, a drink in one hand, tossing her hair like a commercial for effortless beauty. She wore a crisp sundress, the kind you buy for brunches you want to be photographed at. Everywhere she went, heads turned, conversations paused. Even here, even in this cracked backyard, she was a gravitational force. I found a quiet spot near the back fence and set my cookies on the folding table, next to a lopsided cake covered in way too much blue icing. A child screamed with laughter somewhere behind me. Someone popped open a can with a sharp hiss. Normal sounds for a normal party, but somehow it all felt tilted, like I was moving through water that wasn't meant for me. Dinner was served on flimsy paper plates, burgers and potato salad and corn dripping with butter. We clustered around the mismatched tables. Norma clinked her plastic cup with a plastic fork, calling for attention. "I just want to take a moment," she said, her voice bright and sugary, "to celebrate ambition and beauty in this family." Everyone turned to look at Sable, glowing under the patio lights. Norma continued, "Some of us have truly big futures ahead, glamorous ones, bright ones. I didn't need a map to see where she was going. And then," she added with a laugh, "there are the steady rocks, the dependable ones who keep the world turning." The way she said it, steady rocks, it sounded like a consolation prize handed out at the end of a losing game. A few people chuckled. I focused on cutting my burger with the side of my plastic fork. Then Clive, sitting at the head of the table, leaned back in his chair and announced loudly, "At least we know Sable will do something big with her life. With Ardis, well, we're just glad she can take care of herself." The words thudded into the air and hung there. Someone laughed, an awkward, too loud laugh. The kind of laugh people do when they don't know whether to join the cruelty or pretend they didn't hear it. I smiled tightly, feeling the edges of myself fray, and excused myself, phone pressed to my ear like a shield. I slipped behind the house, out of the sight of the patio lights, and leaned against the faded siding. The coolness of the wall seeped through my thin cardigan. I didn't make a call. I just stood there, staring up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to blink into existence. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was pitiful. The realization stung worse than being forgotten. I could survive invisibility. I could shrink small enough to survive being overlooked. But this, being reduced to a joke told over greasy paper plates, this was something else entirely. I stood there for a long time, long after the laughter and music drifted away on the summer air, long after the plates had been cleared and Sable's name toasted over and over again. Something small inside me hardened that night, and it would never quite soften again. The hospital halls smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee as I dragged myself through another long shift. I tucked my hair into a loose bun, slung my bag over one shoulder, and stepped into the misty air of a Thursday evening that didn't feel like anything special. Another day survived. Another day closer to that new car I had been saving for. My little escape plan. Something reliable. Something mine. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and opened my laptop. Bills lined up like soldiers on the screen. Insurance, rent, groceries. I chewed my lip, doing mental math, then remembered. I had that old savings account. The one I'd given to my mother to keep safe years ago when my job first started paying me enough to think about the future. I dialed her number, half listening to the hum of the traffic outside my window. "Hey, Mom," I said when she picked up. "Can we transfer that savings money soon? I'm looking at a few listings this weekend." There was a pause, a sharp, surgical silence. "Oh, honey," she said breezily. "We used that to help Sable out a while back. You know, when she needed help getting her beauty business off the ground." The words hit harder than any slap. I blinked at my laptop screen, the spreadsheet blurring. "You... what?" I managed, voice barely above a whisper. "Well, family comes first, sweetheart," she said. "You weren't even using it. You're doing fine, right?" My hands went cold against the keyboard. Fine. I was fine. Fine enough, apparently, to have the things I scraped together peeled away without a second thought. I didn't remember much of the rest of the conversation, just fragments. Her telling me how proud she was that I was independent, how Sable needed the chance to find her path, how she was sure I'd understand. I ended the call before the tears could come. Sitting in my kitchen, I stared at the peeling countertop, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall growing louder with each passing second. Every shift, every double I had picked up, every cheap takeout meal instead of going out with friends, every night spent pinching pennies while Sable spent freely, it had led here to nothing. I went back to my laptop, opened my banking app, and confirmed what I already knew. Zero balance. Gone. The betrayal hollowed out my chest until I felt like I could see straight through myself. Later, after the numbness dulled into a slow ache, I called her again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Norma sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being unreasonable. "You always hoard money, Ardis. Sable needed it more than you did. You should be proud you were able to help your sister." The casual way she framed it, the way she twisted my hard work into selfishness, scraped against something raw inside me. I hung up before I could say anything unforgivable. Back in my living room, I sank onto the couch and stared out at the darkened street beyond my window. A jogger passed by, bundled against the chill, earbuds in, oblivious to the small heartbreak unfolding behind the glass. Maybe I deserved this. Maybe wanting something for myself, even something as simple as security, stability, was selfish. Maybe they were right about me all along. Hours later, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I sat cross-legged on my bed, laptop humming against my knees, and opened my empty checking account one more time. That night, I promised myself, never again would I trust them with anything I couldn't afford to lose. The break room smelled like burnt popcorn and cheap antibacterial spray, a tired combination that clung to my clothes as I packed my things. My feet ached after the long shift, the kind that leaves you walking like you're made of glass. But when my phone buzzed with Norma's name, I already knew I wouldn't be going home to rest. "Family first, right?" she chirped before I could even say hello, her voice bright with the assumption that I would say yes, like I always did. Sable needed help setting up her party tonight, and wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could see how close we all were? The shift I had picked up for extra pay, gone with 2 sentences. I told myself it was fine. One night, one more small piece of myself handed over without a fight. When I arrived at the house, the backyard was already a mess of balloons and folding chairs. The kitchen counters were buried under trays of food. Sable floated around, all flowing hair and breezy laughter, directing everyone with the casual authority of someone who knew the spotlight was hers by birthright. I spent the next hour hanging lights and rearranging tables, while Sable posed for selfies with friends. No one noticed the sweat clinging to my forehead, or the way my hands shook from exhaustion. No one offered help. No one thanked me. As guests began to arrive, Sable's laughter filled the air, easy and infectious. Every conversation buzzed around her. Compliments flew like confetti. How beautiful she looked, how exciting her future seemed. I stood at the edge of it all, invisible but necessary, like a coat rack no one thought to move but everyone used. Then, someone pulled out a phone. I didn't think much of it at first. Sable loved attention. Her Instagram feed was practically a shrine to her own life. But when I caught the words drifting over the crowd, my heart twisted. "We've got the hard-working sister here too," Sable said, giggling as she swung the camera toward me without warning. "You know, the one with no life, just shifts and cats." Laughter erupted, sharp and bright and awful. The image of me, stunned, cornered, blinking like a deer in headlights, was broadcast to every friend, every follower she had. I didn't even realize I was moving until I found myself in the kitchen, the cold handle of the fridge pressing against my back as I tried to breathe. I was the punchline to a joke I never agreed to be part of. The noise of the party became a dull roar behind me, like the ocean when you're drowning just under the surface. I pressed my palms to my eyes until the world went dark, trying to hold myself together, trying not to cry where someone might see and make it worse. When I finally walked back through the house, no one noticed me leaving. No one cared. The night air was cool against my burning face as I crossed the lawn, stepping carefully around empty Solo cups and discarded plates. I didn't look back. That night, something inside me didn't just crack. It split wide open, The hospital clock blinked 7:32 p.m. in dull green numbers as I peeled off my scrubs, my body aching from another endless shift. I stuffed them into my tote bag and tied my hair up without thinking. Before I could even slide my badge out for the night, my phone buzzed. Norma. The message was short, almost casual. "Can you come help with Sable's party? Family first, right?" I stared at it for a long second, the exhaustion pooling in my shoulders, the automatic yes rising up in my throat before my brain could catch up. It was late. I had a chance to finally sleep. I had a chance to just be invisible for a while, unnoticed and untouched. But family first, right? I texted back a short, hollow, "On my way." The backyard of Norma's house was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Paper lanterns hung from the trees, casting soft pools of light onto tables piled high with catered food. Sable flitted between groups of friends, her laughter high and musical, the star of a show she never had to audition for. I slipped into the current, arranging chairs, fetching napkins, making sure everything looked effortless while I tried to hide the way my back throbbed from standing all day. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. I could have disappeared right there among the folding tables, and no one would have paused to ask where I went. When the last table was set and the music turned up, Sable decided it was time to share her perfect evening with the rest of the world. She pulled out her phone, went live on social media, and spun slowly, showing off the guests, the decorations, and finally landing the camera on me. "And here's our hardworking sister," she said, grinning like it was a compliment. "No time for fun, no time for friends, but hey, someone's got to keep the lights on, right?" The group around her erupted in laughter. Real, raw laughter that rolled across the yard and dug into my skin like glass shards. I stood there, frozen, my hand still holding a tray of untouched cupcakes. I was the punchline to a joke I never agreed to be part of. I turned away before anyone could see the heat rising up my neck, slipping through the sliding door into the kitchen. The clatter of the party dulled behind the walls, replaced by the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the stove. I leaned against the counter, palms pressed into the cool laminate, breathing slowly until the sting in my chest dulled into something heavier. I checked my phone once, saw the live video still running, comments pouring in. I set it down without reading them. Maybe this was what family meant. Giving and giving until there was nothing left but a hollow shape of yourself that people could laugh at without guilt. I left without a word. No goodbyes, no excuses. Just the sound of my own footsteps crunching down the gravel driveway, swallowed up by the night. That night, something inside me didn't just crack. It split wide open. The morning air had the first real bite of fall as I stepped out of the hospital. My breath made faint clouds in the chill, and the brittle leaves skittered across the parking lot, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. My steps quickened toward the spot where my car always waited, a small silver sedan that smelled faintly of lavender air freshener and freedom. Except today, the space was empty. I stopped, blinking against the morning glare, scanning left and right. A mistake, maybe. I had parked farther down. I retraced my steps, circled the lot twice, heart hammering harder with each lap. The spot was unmistakable. It had been mine for years, just like the car had been mine, earned with endless overtime hours and missed holidays. Panic clawed its way up my throat as I pulled out my phone and dialed Norma. She answered on the second ring, sounding almost cheerful. "Hey, honey, what's up?" "My car," I said, voice strangled. "It's gone." A beat of silence. "Oh, that," she said, like I was asking about a misplaced sweater. "We sold it." The world tilted sideways. "You sold it?" "Sweetheart," Norma said, her voice dipping into that familiar syrupy tone that always meant she thought she was being reasonable. "Sable needed a little boost, that opportunity in London. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." I closed my eyes, gripping the cold metal rail of the bike rack beside me. "You sold my car," I repeated, as if saying it again would make it make sense. "You weren't using it that much anyway," Clive chimed in from the background, his voice casual, almost bored. "Figured it would be better put to good use." Good use. Good use was funding Sable's photo shoots and champagne brunches in another country, while I juggled night shifts and bus schedules like a college freshman. I hung up before my shaking hands could throw the phone. Back at my apartment, I stood in the doorway, the key still in my palm, unsure of what to do next. The space inside looked foreign all of a sudden. Too small, too bare, a holding cell rather than a home. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. The silence pressed down heavier than any conversation could have. It wasn't just about the car. It wasn't even about the money. It was about how easily they decided I didn't matter. That my independence, my hard-earned victories, were negotiable, expendable. I thought of all the nights I had worked double shifts, the meals I had skipped, the dresses I hadn't bought, the vacations I had turned down, all so I could afford something that was mine, something no one could touch. And just like that, it was gone. Because they decided it should be. Later, after the sun had set and my apartment was swallowed by early darkness, I opened the kitchen drawer where I kept spare keys. Nestled among the rubber bands and old takeout menus was the extra car key, the tiny black remote still attached to its faded keychain. I wrapped my fingers around it, clutching it like a talisman, like proof that I had once had something no one else had touched. My hand shook, my chest ached. If they could take away something I built with my own hands, what was left that was truly mine? The church hall smelled faintly of wood polish and old hymn books, the air carrying that specific stillness only autumn seemed to bring. Rows of folding chairs were neatly arranged around tables laden with potluck dishes and store-bought desserts. Kids darted between adults clutching paper plates. It should have felt familiar. It didn't. I tightened my grip on the casserole dish I had brought, something simple, forgettable, and scanned the room. Smiles met me, but they were different now. Tight, hollow. I felt it in the way conversations slowed when I approached, in the way eyes darted away after the briefest moment of contact. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was reading too much into it, still raw from everything that had happened. But then, in the lull between songs and announcements, I caught snippets. She's changed, hasn't she? She only cares about money now. Softly spoken, but loud enough to leave bruises. Norma's voice floated through the crowd like a ghost, whispering tales spun with threads of disappointment and betrayal. And Clive, ever the silent accomplice, nodded along in casual agreement, his hands folded neatly over his stomach. By the time dessert was served, I had stopped trying to insert myself into conversations. Instead, I lingered by the window, watching the leaves tumble from the trees outside, wondering when exactly I had become a stranger to the people who once called me family. The next blow came silently, pixelated, through my phone. On the family group chat, there were jokes about those who think they're too good for their roots, accompanied by laughing emojis. Photos of Sable, smiling in front of London landmarks, flooded the chat, each one captioned with comments like, "All thanks to love and family support." And, "Some people could learn a thing or two about gratitude." I wasn't tagged, but I didn't have to be. The messages spread like wildfire. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, old family friends, even distant relatives who barely knew me, all nodding along, smiling politely in public and judging in private. It wasn't long before Norma moved from whispers to direct messages. A screenshot appeared in my inbox one night, forwarded by a concerned friend who hadn't yet joined the chorus. It was a post Norma had made in a private group, a long, heartfelt lament about a once sweet daughter who had turned selfish and cruel, demanding what wasn't hers, hurting her own family with her greed. I read it 3 times, the words warping and twisting in my mind, until I couldn't tell where the lies ended and the truth should have started. I sat on the floor of my living room that night, phone slipping from my hand onto the worn carpet. The apartment around me was still and too large, even though it was the same space I had lived in for years. Loneliness wasn't new to me, but this calculated, sharpened isolation was something else. When they couldn't control me anymore, they made sure no one else would want to stand beside me either. The wind howled down the empty streets of Bethlehem as I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by scattered papers and open tabs on my laptop. The walls, once familiar and protective, now felt like they were pressing inward, each breath growing harder to take. I stared at the form on the screen, the lawsuit draft. Every line on that page felt like both a betrayal and a salvation. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't the one who made noise. I was the one who adjusted, compromised, stayed quiet. But staying quiet had cost me everything. The decision wasn't made in a moment of rage. It came slowly, like a tide pulling me out to sea. In the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, after reading message after message filled with half-hearted apologies and backhanded guilt trips, I realized, if I didn't protect what little I had left, no one else would. I scheduled a meeting with a local attorney the next morning. His office was small, cluttered with worn leather chairs and the smell of strong coffee. He listened quietly as I laid it all out. Years of being overlooked, used, erased. "You have a case," he said simply, flipping through the documentation, "and you have a right to fight for what's yours." The word fight tasted foreign in my mouth, but it lodged there, solid and real. When the lawsuit notice was officially delivered, the reaction was immediate. Phone calls at all hours, Norma leaving tearful voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart. Clive texting short, clipped messages warning me to think about what I was doing. Even Sable chimed in, painting herself as a victim of my cold-heartedness. It might have worked once. Maybe even just a few months ago, I would have crumbled under the weight of their disappointment. But now, the messages only confirmed what I already knew. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry I was fighting back. Norma invited me over for a talk, her voice thick with sugary sorrow. Against my better judgment, I went. Not for her, but for closure. The house looked the same as always, the porch light buzzing faintly, a plastic fall wreath hanging crookedly on the door. Inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon candles and overcooked casseroles wrapped around me like a net. Norma greeted me with a tight hug, her eyes glistening. She led me to the kitchen, where a cup of coffee sat waiting for me, already sweetened just the way I used to like it. "We made mistakes," she said, voice trembling, "but family should stick together. We don't need lawyers between us." For a flicker of a moment, I wanted to believe her. Then my phone buzzed, an email notification. I opened it without thinking, expecting maybe another work reminder. Instead, it was from a distant cousin, a forwarded email thread Norma had accidentally included me in. In it, she laid out her plan to manipulate me into dropping the lawsuit by faking reconciliation. Her words were cold, clinical, no regret, no real apology, just strategy. The cup of coffee sat untouched between us. I looked up at Norma, still crying her crocodile tears, and felt something inside me finally settle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was done. They never wanted peace. They wanted my silence. I stood up, letting the chair scrape loudly against the tiled floor. Norma blinked up at me, her tears drying instantly into confusion, maybe even fear. "For the first time in my life," I said softly, almost kindly, "I'm not running toward your approval. I'm walking away from your chains." And I walked out of the house, leaving the door swinging gently behind me. The new apartment was smaller, tucked into the top floor of an old brick building with creaky stairs and drafty windows. But it was mine. The sunlight poured through the east-facing windows every morning, lighting up the pale wood floors and casting long, warm beams across the second-hand couch I had bargained for at a thrift shop. Early winter had settled over Bethlehem, crisp and clean, the trees stripped bare but somehow beautiful in their honesty. I liked it better this way, no pretense, just the truth standing quietly in the cold. The settlement from the lawsuit wasn't much, a modest sum, more symbolic than transformative. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the line drawn in the sand, about finally saying, no more. I didn't throw a party. I didn't tell many people. I didn't even feel the need to celebrate. I signed the papers quietly in my lawyer's office, thanked him, and went home. The phone stayed silent after that. No messages from Norma, no lukewarm check-ins from Clive, no passive-aggressive texts from Sable. The family tree had pruned itself overnight, and all that was left was the sound of my own breathing in a room that no longer felt like a waiting room for their approval. Old friends disappeared too, ones who had always stayed closer to the center of the family's orbit. It hurt less than I thought it would. The silence was a kindness compared to the sharpness of their conditional love. I found new spaces to exist in, A small writing gig editing newsletters turned into a part-time role at a nonprofit. I started a blog under a pseudonym, sharing essays about resilience, about building a life from broken things. Strangers left kind comments. Some shared their own stories. And for the first time in years, connection didn't feel like something I had to earn by bleeding for it. Sometimes I would catch myself walking by a park or sitting in a quiet cafe, and a flicker of memory would catch me off guard. Birthday parties with balloons I never asked for. Smiles that stretched thin when I wasn't the daughter they wanted. I mourned them the way you mourn a dream you finally wake up from. One cold evening, I found myself walking downtown, the Christmas lights already strung up across Main Street, even though Thanksgiving hadn't yet come. The air smelled of cinnamon and wet pavement, and every breath felt sharp and real. I paused by the window of a little bookstore, watching as a mother and daughter browsed inside. The mother leaned down, laughing, as the girl held up a bright red novel like it was a treasure. For a moment, the glass between us blurred, not from the cold, but from the sudden sting behind my eyes. It wasn't longing, not really. It was gratitude. Gratitude that I had finally stopped asking to be chosen. I turned away, pulling my coat tighter around me as the first snowflakes of the season drifted down, soft as forgiveness. Maybe freedom isn't being loved by everyone. Maybe freedom is finally loving yourself enough to walk away. If there's one thing life has taught me, it's that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people you love. I spent years believing that sacrifice meant loyalty, that silence meant strength. But real strength is setting boundaries. Real love doesn't demand your dignity as payment. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you must protect yourself from. And that's okay. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, know that you're not alone. Healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like building a life you don't have to escape from. What about you? Have you ever had to choose peace over approval? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're from, or just leave a 1 inch if this touched your heart. If you enjoyed this story and it resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join me for more true stories that speak to the soul. Let's heal and grow together.